Death Battle is my favorite YouTube series of all time. It has been this way for several years. I started Death Battle at the very tail end of Season 2 when Green Arrow vs. Hawkeye was a new episode. I technically started watching the show before this, but I didn't really get into the series all too much until then. But my time with the show has been a good one. I've had my ups and downs, my bad reactions to winners before. The whole cycle of being happy and sad, usually leaning towards the results and not really anything else. But I do still love Death Battle regardless on how they end up coming up with the result. I mean, you should have seen my face when Sonic vs. Mario 2018 came out. I was still in elementary school. I actually cried when Sonic lost. Yeah, I was that big of a fanboy of Sonic. I still technically am, because I had a similar reaction when he lost to Flash in Season 7. But anyways, that's not the point of this video right here. Obviously, Death Battle had a Kickstarter at the very tail end of last year. And to me and a lot of other Death Battle fans, this was one of the best things we could have ever gotten. Seeing all these new episodes that were under production from these stretch goals, it was absolutely awesome. But I'm realizing I've never actually talked about them all too much on the channel. I've talked about a couple of them, but usually it was already after they happened, and the most recent example of me mentioning it was Mahito vs. Shigaraki, and I didn't make a video on that until after it was announced as the next episode after Ghost Rider vs. Spawn. So anyways, today we're going to be talking about my favorite Kickstarter matchup. And if you actually watched my opinion on Mahito vs. Shigaraki video, you may have heard the fact that this was actually my second favorite Kickstarter matchup from the ones they had announced in the Kickstarter. But it's not my favorite. My actual favorite is one that I've liked for a very long time. And newsflash, it isn't Bowser vs. Eggman. Although this episode would be pretty high up there when it comes to the Kickstarter matchups. But funny enough, I don't actually see people talking about this matchup in terms of them being their favorite. In fact, to most people, it's probably their least favorite from what I've seen online, out of the ones that they said on the Kickstarter, obviously. But this matchup means a lot to me, and I'm so glad it is happening. And if you can't guess based on the thumbnail of the video, this matchup is Hulk versus Godzilla. And I'm going to discuss why I like this matchup and a whole bunch of other things relating to what I want to see and what I expect to see, along with some other things. But let's begin. This matchup and I have a very, very long and complicated history throughout my life. Now, if you don't know this, Godzilla is my favorite franchise ever, and Godzilla is my favorite character ever. So it's pretty obvious that a matchup with him is going to be something I like. Hulk, on the other hand, is a character I haven't had nearly as much interest in terms of how much I like him in comparison to Godzilla, but he's a character that has been around me like my entire life. I've known who Hulk is way before I knew who Godzilla was. And in my mind, ever since I was really young, I've always wondered who would actually come out on top between these two characters. Even though at first I thought it was obviously Godzilla because he was bigger. But that was my mindset when I was younger, not my mindset now. My love for this matchup really started when Animation Rewind did their Rewind Rumble on this matchup over 6 years ago. This fight really sparked my interest in it, and at first I thought it was just confirmed, oh yeah, Godzilla wins this fight. But then things got more complicated. Hulk got a lot more stuff later on, like the Immortal issues, Devil, all that stuff, and things became a lot more interesting to talk about. Well, at first I thought it was just an unfair stomp for Hulk, but then Godzilla and Hell came on my radar, and then Godzilla's Singular Point. Oh Jesus, that got my attention pretty quickly. This matchup had been kind of revived for me because now it was an entirely different type of debate. Before we were just talking about really powerful characters, but now we have some of the most powerful characters, depending on how you see things, that the show has ever used. And, well, yeah, this really sparked my interest, because now we had all of this new stuff to go over. And also the fact Godzilla hasn't been in the show since season 2 against an opponent that he was very easily beating, at least from the information that they used. And Hulk, he hasn't exactly had the best track record on Death Battle, with him losing to Doomsday, which actually I think it was pretty accurate for when they did it, but now it's not. And then obviously Hulk versus Broly, while I thought is a good episode, I don't agree with the result they came down to. And I feel like Hulk got kind of the short end of the barrel in that episode. Meaning that seeing these two come back with their best and hopefully the last time. Because at this point, basically, this is going to be the third appearance for both of them. And you might be wondering, what do you mean? Godzilla has only been on the show twice. Well, that's where Mechagodzilla comes in. And while Mechagodzilla isn't technically Godzilla, he also technically is, because the Mechagodzilla they used was Kiryu, which is literally just Godzilla, or at least the bones of him in a mechanical suit that still has the personality of Godzilla. Meaning, effectively, Godzilla has been on this show 3 times before any other kaiju from his series actually got onto it. And this would also be Hulk's 3rd appearance. I'm not mad by this fact. I'm glad that this matchup is happening, which is why I'm talking about it. I want this to be their finale on the show. Finally go out with a bang, showing the two at their best. And also, this is going to be composite, or at least that's what I strongly believe. The Death Battle cast went over this in the composite term, and that's the only way that this fight actually really gets that interesting. I've seen people scale Heisei to levels that could compare to the Hulk, but even then, I feel like they could just use Godzilla and Hell to get to those measurements more consistently. And that would make this a lot more interesting because, well, there is a lot to go over when it comes to these characters that they haven't really gone over before. And with Godzilla, I just want to hear about all the new things that he's gotten since his last time on the show. And that actually leans into the reason why I like this matchup for Godzilla over all the others. Godzilla can go all out. With his other matchups, you can't really do the same thing. If he goes all out, there isn't really much of a debate, and if we use the baseline versions of him, like from movies, we are getting basically a lot of the same things that we already heard. I know there's still quite a bit of new information that they didn't cover back in Season 2, but a lot of his power set would still remain the same, and I don't really want that. I want to hear all the new crazy stuff this guy can do. Especially when he's being paired against a character that can do just as much crazy stuff. I know Death Battle isn't all the time having to have these characters with crazy power sets, but I feel like if we're going to have these characters on the show one last time, I feel like why not go all out? But I'll make this a quick mention. I am very surprised that this episode is actually happening. I mean, it didn't do that well at all in the Tournament of Champions. It didn't even make it past the first round. I don't even think it was the second place or in the first round either. So the fact that they decided to do this, I mean, that's just kind of shocking to me. I guess they really wanted to do it. I believe it was the first one they did a cast for. Or at least the first one I could remember. Did they do one beforehand? Maybe they did the composite Ryu versus composite Goku one before. I don't quite remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, I'm still glad they're doing it. Anyways, now that we're done with the introduction and talking about why I love the matchup, let's talk about the actual debate part of this fight. The debate part of this episode is definitely one of the most interesting aspects to me about this. Geez, this gets complicated really fast, and honestly, I think this fight could actually go either way. It really just depends on what you believe for both characters and how you use it. Let's try starting out small to get a baseline of what these two are capable of, using the movie version of Godzilla and what he's capable of, and baseline comic book Hulk. Oh, for Godzilla, starting with his Heisei era movies and talking about Space Godzilla, this character kind of ranges from all over the place, but for consistent ends, Space Godzilla is absolutely solar system level, since most of what it was created by was from Godzilla cells interacting with a black hole and being transported to space crystals, basically. Meaning, at minimum, solar system level. But it is stated it can absorb endless amounts of energy from the universe, meaning that Space Godzilla could actually reach the universal ranges in this power scaling. And since Burning Godzilla exists, this means that Heisei Godzilla would scale above this quite a bit, especially with that infinite spiral heat ray, which, if we take literally, would also be a universal level attack. And then we have Showa Godzilla, which can fight fourth dimensional level monsters. By the way, this is from Zone Fighter where he does this, so it wouldn't be surprising if a lot of people didn't know about this. But yes, he can fight on par with Zone Fighter and has actually been shown to be stronger than Zone Fighter, which is stronger than those fourth dimensional level characters. So overall, yeah. While you can get Godzilla higher than this, I believe the best scaling that is consistent for him, from what I remember, is solar system to universal plus levels of power in terms of the movie Godzillas. Comparing this to comic book Hulk, however, we can first scale him to Century, which, well, can survive the wrath of 1,000,000 exploding suns. This would already get Hulk in the multi-solar system level ranges of power. However, we can look at this further. Beings like Thor have been able to hold up entire realms and universes, and because of this, well, this is obviously universal plus in power. And then we equate for the fact of the multipliers when these two fight. Yes, World Breaker Hulk would be a multiplier. But based on the fact that Hulk and Thor can regularly contend with each other, and while Thor overall in the comics seems like he would have an edge over this baseline Hulk, Hulk should scale anywhere around universal plus to multiversal level of power in this case, because these two fighting just cause massive havoc for the entire multiverse area that they're in, and fights that Thor has literally shook the realms before. I think Universal Plus is the easiest one to say, but Multiversal, you can easily get Hulk there. And to be honest, this is nothing in comparison to what these characters should be able to do. This is a baseline scaling of me just going off of what I see on screen and what the statements say. There are things getting even these baseline versions of the characters even higher. I've seen arguments for hyperversal levels for both of these characters, even without their biggest multipliers from their best showings in series. But what this debate really comes down to is Godzilla in Hell versus Immortal Hulk. This is kind of where the matchup mostly lies. For the most part, before this, I think Hulk had the advantage in overall stats, since you can more consistently get him that high than what you could get Godzilla. But this is where things get really, really complicated. Starting off with the fact that both of these characters effectively kill gods and demons all the time. In fact, Hulk basically is the devil, or the one below all, which is basically the exact opposite of the one above all, and this character is basically the devil, to the one above all being God. And while there are a lot of devils in Marvel's universe, the one below all seems to be implied to be the most powerful. And, well, I mean, if you've seen Death Battle's analysis on this before, you should know weaker characters like Mephisto basically can cause havoc to the entire Marvel existence, to the entire outerverse of Marvel, with some of his fights, like the ones with Galactus, reaching the edge of oblivion, which basically is outside of the entire Marvel multiverse. And well, this just gets more insane from here. And Hulk has that power. While it might not be fully controllable in comparison, and while Hulk isn't exactly on the same level as the one below all, I think, it's still important to note he is still able to fight and slightly contend with him and has a bit of his power. So, yeah. Also, he just basically has the ability to send characters to hell and make sure they never come back. He can basically come back from any amount of damage, and he has killed several Marvel gods already. And then we have Godzilla in Hell, which, yes, I do believe is the strongest version of Godzilla, even above Godzilla Ultima. But in terms of what Godzilla in Hell has done, he killed Satan and God, which are abstract beings. Well, I mean, he killed the God Mountain, which destroyed basically everything. And his atomic breath, well, this version of the atomic breath is called, or at least I believe it's called, the Holy Atomic Breath, or something relating to religion of some type. I don't remember the exact name of it right now. But this is actually probably Godzilla's best bet and best win con. Yes, Godzilla hasn't shown to have it anymore, but that's because Godzilla in Hell has never really came back. But at the same time, I mean, they used Divine Spawn despite Spawn not having it anymore. There's no reason why they wouldn't use this for Godzilla. So comparing this with Hulk, how strong is Godzilla? It really is up to interpretation, with Godzilla, I would say at minimum being multiversal level because of this God Mountain thing. And while that doesn't scale anywhere near to what Hulk was able to do, you can scale Godzilla a lot higher. It really just depends on what you believe. In terms of regeneration, Godzilla can survive with just his bones. Actually, he doesn't even need his bones as long as seemingly any part of him has survived. Maybe he doesn't even need any part of him to survive, but from what we know, as long as there's something remaining, Godzilla will always regenerate. It doesn't really seem to matter what is gone. He's been stripped down to a skeleton or even just his heart, and that's not even just Godzilla in Hell we're talking about. He even seems to be able to control whatever kills him, like how he did with the Hellbats, even though it does seem like this depends on if what killed him consumed him. And, well, when it comes to how this breath does work on Hulk, honestly, it just kind of feels like the perfect counter. The devil gets defeated by the Holy Atomic Breath. That's how it was in the Godzilla comic. Why wouldn't it work the same here? Although, obviously, that's very debatable to say it would work here. And that's where we get to the winner. And personally, I believe Hulk does end up winning this fight. While there are metas where these two are very similar in power. In fact, I believe these characters are the same in power, especially when we look at everything they have, and kind of going just all out with Godzilla and Hell. If I were to put my bets on who I think Death Battle is going to say would win this fight, I think Hulk is probably coming out on top here, and here's why. While I think it's going to be extremely difficult for either of these characters to kill each other, Hulk is way easier to say that he could just come back from anything, since we've seen it happen before. With Godzilla, maybe we've seen stuff like that before, but Hulk's is way more consistent. Not to mention the fact that Hulk just has way more powerful metas that you can get to easier than what Godzilla has. With Godzilla, you most likely would have to make a bit of assumption and highballing of Godzilla and Hell. Well, Hulk gets there way more casually, and we know Death Battle can go to outerversal metas, with Ghost Rider versus Spawn being, well, the best meta for this to show. Now, power doesn't really mean everything. I mean, again, Ghost Rider versus Spawn is there to exist. But the difference is that Hulk's survivability is just a whole lot better. Not to mention, Hulk might actually just be stronger than Zarathos outright. So, yeah, because the one below all is claimed to be the bottom reaches of hell, which would be more powerful than Mephisto, and Zarathos, while might be stronger than Mephisto, it's not to the same degree. So at minimum, we would probably get Hulk at around the outer versal level ranges, while Godzilla, while can get that high, depending on what you believe, obviously, just doesn't get there as consistently, and even if we said that they both were outer versal somehow, Hulk would still probably reasonably be in the higher ranges of that. And unlike with Spawn, Godzilla doesn't necessarily have the hacks needed to take down Hulk other than that atomic breath, which I think can be made the argument for that this could actually kill Hulk, since it was able to kill God and the Devil, both characters who created literally everything. I actually don't think Hulk has a counter to this. The problem is, again, Hulk is just more likely to get off that final attack first, and I think it's way more consistent for Godzilla to go down than Hulk is, at least from what I know Death Battle goes over. I think this is actually surprisingly close of a matchup, which is even more why I like this one. And I'm going to be rooting for Godzilla, I'm not going to lie. While Hulk, yes, has lost twice already, Godzilla is just always going to be the character I vote for, especially in a fight like this. Because even if I think he's gonna lose this episode, I just really will cling on to the hope that somehow, some way, Godzilla ends up winning this episode. And overall, yeah, that is my opinion on this fight. I really like this fight, and I'm not surprised that I do, really. This will be my most anticipated for episode from the ones that were revealed. And while, yes, there has been matchups so far that I have liked more than Hulk versus Godzilla, like Ghost Rider versus Spawn literally came out, and yes, I do like that matchup more than Hulk versus Godzilla. This is my favorite one from the Kickstarter, as this video would imply, and I cannot wait for it to happen. When will it happen? Probably 2026, based on the fact that this kind of came really late in the Kickstarter. Like, this was the second to last one, so I'm betting this is probably happening before Gru versus Megamind, but probably one of the later ones in 2026. And that is kind of sad, because that might mean I have a whole nother year to wait before we get this episode. But anyways, thank you guys for watching this video, and what do you think of Hulk versus Godzilla as a matchup? Do you like it, or do you hate it? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I know a lot of people on both sides of this debate. But basically, yeah. Thanks for watching. See you next time.